I need to start this video off by telling you a little bit of a story to give some greater context to a particular term. So back in the day when there was the age of pirates, people were just constantly at sea. They would sail about, looting, stealing, trying to survive in their own very, very brutal way. Well, occasionally they would actually get stuck in the middle of the ocean due to tides or lack of wind, and if you got stuck out there long enough, you would eventually probably resort to cannibalism. This actually happened pretty often, and it was called the unforgivable sin. It was considered the one thing that is just so awful that you never talk about it, you never acknowledge it, and if somebody does it, you never forgive them for the act. And I definitely feel like when it comes to the writing world, plagiarism is now the unforgivable sin. What's up gamers, DreamcastGuy here, and today we're actually talking about YIIK. This is an indie RPG that has now been pretty conclusively accused of plagiarism, completely lifting entire lines from a famous book and just slapping it into his game. Now, I do need to admit that I haven't actually beaten YIIK yet. I was sent a copy of it, and I played a little bit, but it's just not very good. It's not like it's a complete dumpster fire of a game, it's just definitely not my cup of tea. It's trying to be very experimental and edgy in a lot of ways that to me just don't quite pay off. But after I played a little bit of it, I kind of just put it down and forgot. It's not the type of game that you really sit around thinking about all day long. Well, what's interesting is there is a pretty cool little fan base that actually gets invested in RPGs like this. Indie projects that are trying to be daring and different. And unfortunately, the people who studied it the hardest have now begun to notice some weird inconsistencies with its text. Most specifically that the creator of the game was recently on a podcast and was talking about the things that inspired him most, the books and texts that he was trying to most replicate with his gaming experience, and something he talked about was Chuck Palahniuk, who's a personal favorite author of mine. Obviously I have a Chuck Palahniuk tattoo, and also Murakami. Now, if you don't know Murakami, he's actually written a lot of award-winning books, and he has a very interesting style of speech. He's somebody who writes in a very, very critical prose, as they call it, and somebody has noticed that there are sentences that are 100% copied and put in the game haphazardly. This is not taking inspiration, this is not using specific cues, this is him taking lines out of the book, literally and directly, and just shoving them in the game. I mean, you can see for yourself, here's some examples. Like, here's one where a character is giving a speech to the main person, and it says, and I quote, "She narrows her eyes and looks at the young man standing there. He is so tall, she seems to be looking far overhead. Their eyes meet. The young man smiles." That is not a miswrite. That's not like some weird accidental thing. This is clearly him opening up the book and going, okay, what am I going to put in my game? This exact sentence. This is not a mistake, this is a plagiarism. Now, it's not just this one sentence, it's actually several, which I'm putting on the screen right here. This is a very serious crime. Now, I'm not even joking about that. Plagiarism is illegal because you are selling other people's content. If somebody was to try and go through and sell just little pieces of a Disney movie, well, obviously that's pretty dang illegal, and it could very obviously land them in jail. That's actually why there's very specific things like on YouTube, you're actually allowed to read anything that's not currently part of copyright. That's the cops coming to arrest him, I guess. Let's wait for this. Something to keep in mind is that copyright law can be a little bit ambiguous, and at times it's a little bit hard to follow what is and is not allowed, but this stuff specifically is what we know for a fact is not allowed, which is why that's one of the things I was trying to say a second ago, which is that you can't read copyrighted books on YouTube. Like, if I want to use a quote from this, which is Battle Royale, I love this book so much, that's allowed. I'm making it clear that that's what this sentence is from. But I am not allowed to actually read an entire chapter of this because I don't own it. It's just random stuff that I managed to purchase, but I don't own a copyright to. Well, what's interesting is I feel like a lot of people don't quite understand the term plagiarism. A lot of people think that if it's not just piece by piece, letter by letter, it's actually a creative rework, and that's not the case. So I've actually decided to pull up the textbook definition of plagiarism so you can all understand it. Okay, so I got my laptop right here so I can actually read to you the dictionary definition of plagiarism. There are in fact different degrees of plagiarism. One can steal an entire paper, or a section of a paper, or a page, or a paragraph, or a sentence. Even copying phrases without credit and quotation marks can be considered plagiarism. In other words, paraphrasing done improperly can qualify as plagiarism. What he's doing here is not paraphrasing. This is literal, textbook definition plagiarism. Now, what's going to happen? To be honest, I actually think that there is a good chance that his game may get taken off the internet. It may be one of those things where it gets pulled down off of Steam and the Switch eShop because they're not one to be a risk. Whenever this type of stuff pops up, the first thing that these companies want to do is try and protect themselves. Now, this stuff is very, very minor. In the grand context, this is only a couple direct lines of plagiarism, but any amount, even if it's just 0.5% of plagiarism, is very much against the law. So I think that what's going to happen is, it's a good possibility that these games are going to disappear in the next 24 hours, or we are going to see a rushed patch. Now, the creator himself is basically just working on this game right now, so I do think that there is also a distinct possibility that this guy just reprograms the game overnight to just try and rewrite those lines. And at this point, he needs to fix it and fast. I'm not sure how much he actually made off this game, but what's weird is, before this came out, there was actually a pretty big amount of, underground hype about it. When I went to PAX South this year, I was looking around the E3 booth, the Indies booth, and this game had a huge line. Literally, I'd say 50 to 80 people were actually lining up to try this game even 15 minutes at a time. Clearly, there was a big groundswell of people who were excited to see an RPG that was trying to be so different, to see something that's inspired by Earthbound and also inspired by a lot of different books. So I do think that perhaps it sold enough that he can rush out a patch, do a big apology, and try and pretend that this was all just some sort of subconscious accident. But if he's not able to just cobble together something very, very quick, well, this guy is going to be in some very big and very deep trouble. Now, I'm just saying here, plagiarism is easily one of the very worst crimes. I mean, right now, just especially in art and in fiction, stealing other people's work directly is so freaking bad. But accidents have happened in the past. I mean, I remember a time where there was actually a big case against Harry Potter. Yes, this is true. Somebody actually wrote the same style of book in a totally different part of the world at the same time purely by happenstance. Their book was called Harry Potter and the Muggles, and it was about a little magic kid going on his own little adventure, and it really had zero connection to the journeys of J.K. Rowling. But what's funny is that this person tried to sue J.K. Rowling, and they couldn't win in court. Basically, it was just kind of one of those weird things of two people both choosing the same style at the same time, when in actuality, they're not really copying off each other's papers. It's just a bad coincidence. Even still, in this case, it seems like a pretty open and shut investigation. But what do you think? Are you somebody who thinks that this is all just a little bit weird, or is this pretty believable to you that this is just a giant misunderstanding? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and also let me know if you've actually played Y2K, because to me, it just didn't really grab my attention, but if everybody says it's so great, maybe I need to give it another shot. I try and play every single game I can, but if stuff is just not super good in the first 2 hours, I usually put it down. Thanks so much for watching, gamers. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, share with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. But do me the biggest favor of all and keep dreaming. I'm actually installing the game again right now just because I uninstalled it a bit ago. Let's see if it's any good, right? Let's see if it's worth stealing. Wait, that's a bad joke. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.